Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 219th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will discuss possible military action against drug cartels. Today's panel begins with Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist, Tom Finley, retired Vice President of Human Resources Development at Rubbermaid Incorporated. Patty Haskins, retired. I'll never know what to do first with Patty. Retired math teacher at Wadsworth High School and former member of the Wadsworth City Council. And Bryan Laubaugh, President of R&B Financial Services. Ron, do you think it's worth? I was writing this question and already knew what the answer was going to be.
Well, John, I want to get into that in a second, but I got
I got to ask the question anyway.
Oh, okay.
Do you think it's worth military action to stop the flow of fentanyl into the United States?
I'm going to get to that, but I did get a little bit sidetracked, and perhaps it's worthwhile. I got in thinking and reading about this earlier. I became wondering what the heck happened to the war on drugs. And a first comment on that is when you define it as a war, you immediately look for enemies, and an unintended consequence of that is I think is that we looked at users as enemies as well as looking at distributors. But thinking about the war on drugs, in some states in the United States, there began to be drug regulations in the 1800s. And I just a couple of little bullet points here. There was in the 1800s, the first congressional act to levy taxes on morphine and opium was in 1890. 1914, the Congress regulate the distribution of cocaine and opium. Didn't ban it, just regulated it. Want to make a little money off of it. There was a marijuana tax in 1937. Then Nixon passed the Controlled Substances Act in 1970. And because I think of rather rampant drug use in the 1960s, all those hippies started the war on drugs. And see, when was that exactly? That was 1971, official war on drugs. And in the mid-1970s, maybe there was a little, my source says there was a slight hiatus, between 73 and 77, 11 states decriminalized marijuana possession. Jimmy Carter became president in 77 after running on a political campaign to decriminalize marijuana. So that sort of thing was going on. In the 1980s, Ronald Reagan reinforced it and expanded it, and then Nancy Reagan's Just Say No campaign to make people aware. But what happened again is that, as critics have pointed out, that there was sort of a disproportionate jurisdiction against people of color, and that happened. And it led to a rapid rise. Here's a statement I read. Rapid rise in nonviolent drug offenses from 50,000 in 1980 to 400,000 in 1997. In 2014, nearly half of the 186,000 people serving time in federal prisons in the United States had been put up in drug-related charges. So what's happened since then? Technically, I think we've gone until the recent fentanyl crisis, really, they've gone truly to more of thinking about helping victims, helping users, as well as trying to get distributors and providers. So, how about intervention in foreign companies? I think it's a tricky question. There's a sovereignty issue here, and personally, I think that if the government invites us in, if the government of that country invites us in to do that, fine. Then we have a legal reason to do it, a legal way to do it. Is there going to be a problem? Are the governments corrupt? Well, with all that money floating around, there's bound to be some corruption. I saw just this week that a former head of the Mexican security forces has been arrested and convicted of taking bribes from the cartels. So it happens, sure. Well, Mexico in oh somewhere around 20 years ago began a really intensive crackdown, and the United States has sent a lot of money there to help them rebuild their security systems and reform their judicial system, help them with policing their southern border, and of course we have the issues on our borders, on our border where we're trying to control that flow of drugs. And it's rampant in Mexico. It's really a tough thing, and it happened when the Colombian cartels began to be shut down, the Medellin group and that sort of thing. The Mexicans at that point had been more or less mules. They'd been in the distribution network, but they gradually took over the wholesale business, and now most of that's coming through Mexico. Though there are other countries as well, but should we get in there and no? Of course, you know my answer to that. I don't think armed aggression is worthwhile. Sanctions hurt ordinary people, so I think we need to keep working with these governments. And there's always sort of surreptitious under the counter actions go on, I'm sure. But I think it's worth thinking too about why people get addicted. Why is that? As some of you know, I have built and maintained my church's website, firstmennonite.com, and I get the requests from people from time to time. Could you put a link to our agency on here? We're fighting addictions, alcoholism, or domestic abuse, or drugs. I got one just recently where a person has written a paper on the relation between depression and addiction. I haven't posted that yet, but I have read it, and I will put that up. And pointed out just reading things. Factors for depression: family history, genetics, excessive stress, gender, improper nutrition, grief, personality traits. Addiction risk factors: peer pressure, less involvement of loved ones, the intake of highly addictive drugs, and depression. So it can be a circular thing here when people become depressed for whatever reason. And one of the main things is stress. Uh, and look at society and the stresses in societies, particularly in communities of people of color, where you have housing issues, you have employment issues. Stress can be a high factor there. Drugs are addictive physiologically. Your brain gets a rapid jolt of dopamine, and your body said, "Hey, this is the best thing ever." But I think we need to continue to look at the users of drugs and the causes for those uses, and try to alleviate those in our society as best we can, as us liberals would like to do, to try to alleviate the societal pressures and problems. As far as military action, no, I don't think that that's an effective means, and particularly legal means to go about this, unless we are invited to do so. So.
Tom, what are your thoughts?
I don't think military actions should occur outside of our country. I do think the military, an arm should be put together and face into the fact that there is a war on drugs. We just aren't fighting it. We're leaving it up to local authorities who are either untrained, don't have the people, or overwhelmed. So we have these tragedies occurring. The other thing which we need to take note of is how related guns and drugs have become. We almost seems like weekly have a tragedy occurring where an addicted person and a gun killed people. So just to reiterate, I think we do need a government, our government, with a military arm that is aimed at the cartels and eliminating them, crippling them, so that they aren't getting stronger. So,
Well, one of the things my wife reminds me of from time to time, the cartels would not have any business if we didn't provide a big market. And Ron's comments indicate that maybe we've got so many different reasons why people are taking drugs that an uphill battle at best to try to destroy the market, which would be the perfect solution if we could find a way to do that. What do you think, Patty?
You have a good point there. I think that if we had better treatment facilities for those that are using drugs to get them off of drugs, there's too many organizations that set up rehab that are really not effective and are just in it for the money. And what you need are truly good organizations that understand how to take people off of drugs, and in that way get rid of the market, as was mentioned. One of the big concerns that I have, and I think I'm hearing a lot about now, of course, is the fentanyl usage. And fentanyl is brought in some ways across the border. The main way that fentanyl gets into the United States, though, is on the California coast, on the West Coast. And it is smuggled in. And I think that the government needs, if there's something that we need to do at this point, is to try to crack down on the bringing of fentanyl into the United States. It's not something that's produced here. Immigration and smuggling is not the way that all drugs get into the United States. Many of the drugs are made here. Fentanyl, however, is one that is brought in, and as the number of deaths has, from year to year has gone up anywhere from 5 to 20 times as much. What we're seeing is that people that are even using drugs for the first time are purchasing not from a pharmacist, because those drug supplies have not been tainted with fentanyl as far as I know, but trying to get that upper or that particular tablet that has been laced with fentanyl. And on that first usage of the drug, they end up dying. Fentanyl is very, very dangerous. A very small amount can be lethal. Even in the event that person receives Narcan quickly. I've read recently that fentanyl stays in the system for so long that even if the Narcan is effective, the fentanyl remains, and that you may need an additional dose of Narcan. Otherwise, you will perish from that amount of fentanyl, even after that first Narcan dosage. So, these are things that, we need to look at. Obviously, education is important, because in most of those cases of fentanyl, people are not getting duped by having a drug put in their drink or by purchasing an over-the-counter drug. It is in too many cases, a young person who decides that it would be safe just that one time to try that drug, and then ends up being a fentanyl-laced drug, and they end up dying. And this is a tragedy. So that, I feel that we as a government and we as a people need to make sure that fentanyl does not come into the United States. Then going beyond that, addressing, the drug crisis, we do have to, of course, deal with borders and drugs that are brought in, making sure that those drugs are not brought in. We need to do something more to treat, as I said, those that have problems with drugs, to make sure that they are not drug addict for all of their life, that they can at least be sober from that drug for a time. And if we don't, we're going to continue to see our young people die at a horrible rate.
Now, there are some people that will intentionally look for fentanyl. Apparently, in the right dosage, it enhances the high that someone gets from cocaine or whatever, but they never know what the dosage is going to be.
And they're playing Russian roulette in doing that, because it only takes a small amount. Very honestly, and this may sound silly, but I don't understand why cartels are bringing and drug dealers are using fentanyl, because it is killing off the people that purchase drugs from them. Maybe I'm silly. I know it supposedly increases the high, but it seems like such a dangerous way to run a business.
To destroy your market.
Yeah.
Parasite destroying its host, that makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, what of the fentanyl comes from China for the most part. They're making money off of it, so they figure those. But again, you're really killing off your market, like I said. The other thing if you talk about invading other countries, I'm not sure that we can do that. Unfortunately, your drugs don't just come from Mexico or even from China. There are countries around the world where the opium crop is the main source of revenue for the government. We have to look at that as well.
We have a long history of invading other countries for a variety of reasons. I'm still confused about why we invaded Iraq. But Bryan, I've got a question for you before you comment. I'm making an assumption from what I think I know about the LDS that illicit drug usage is not much of a problem for Mormons. And is that right? Or does it exist there as well?
Sure. Yeah, it does. Maybe not as prevalent in the overall, communities, but I think every group, every organization, every church, religious organization has been touched by illegal drug use. And we're no different. It might not be as much, but there are problems with addiction. I mean, alcoholism, illicit, drugs, marijuana use, cocaine use, heroin. So yeah, it's probably not prevalent. And our numbers are probably lower than the national average. But no, we still deal with that issue. And my thought is, we have to come at this from every possible angle. Just going into a country and napalming their cocaine fields or their or some heroin factory, I don't know if that really gets the job done. They just spring up somewhere else. I think that if we had a campaign like they did with smoking, okay, for the longest time, cigarette companies gave cigarettes out for free.
Yeah.
All the soldiers that went off to World War I, World War II, part of their rations were, several packs of cigarettes. Those were free. And then there was a campaign to educate the public as to the dangers of smoking. And I think you see smoking, it's very, very rarely do you see it as much as it used to be. You get on an airplane now, you can't smoke. Used to be all the smokers were in the back of the airplane. Go to a restaurant.
Before that, you could smoke anywhere on an airplane.
You could smoke in the airport. You could smoke going down the gate. Didn't make any difference.
Yeah.
Restaurants, there was a smoking section. Now, no smoking. And so I think an education of the dangers of it, as well as, we need to do something about the demand. I don't want to say that this is a supply and a demand issue, but there's a demand out there for these drugs. And as long as there's a demand, the cartels will provide the supply, bottom line. And it's always sort of a ratcheting up of the high. It's no longer good enough just to get a high off of marijuana. Got to throw a little fentanyl in that thing. Or it's no longer good to do the cocaine. You got to lace it with some other drug. And what happens is it's killing people. Their heart stops. They're dead. It's not one of those things where, Johnny was at a party and had a few beers and someone was passing around a few pills. He took some pills and he had a bad hangover and a headache and he had some psychedelic break and he was walking around the streets buck naked. No, he takes the drug and he drops dead. That's how dangerous it is. Fentanyl is on the rise. You can even talk about some of the painkillers. We had an opioid crisis, and what people, sadly, it affects our community as well. If you look at the EMS runs, and when there's a bad batch of drugs that makes its way into our community, the overdose and EMS runs go through the roof. And the Narcan, it's not helping. They have to hit them, once, twice, three times to get them back. So we have to, I think, look at this a little more holistically and say one aspect would be to work with governments that these drugs are coming out of. China, Mexico. We got to root out the corruption in these countries. Like it was Ron mentioned, you kind of wonder who you're dealing with down in Mexico. The cartels have a stranglehold on their governments, and we have to provide support. Let's just say that support for them. We don't need the SEAL Team 6 to go down in there. Let's lend them a couple AWACS, high altitude, satellites, so that they can actually have the intel to go after these people. Let's shut down their sources of currency. If they're dealing in Bitcoin, let's take it. If they're dealing in currency, let's take it. If you are linked to a cartel, take the money. That's not something that we're strained. We do it all the time. If someone gets caught as dealing drugs, they confiscate his home, they confiscate the boat, they confiscate the cars, everything. Let's break their backs. We can't let them continue to push the levers here and there and say, well, we can't do that because of this and that and the other. If we're going to go to war with them, let's go to war. Let's go to war and win it. Let's not go to war and pansy around and say, well, we can't do this, and we got to do this, and that's not going to work. So holistically, we have to do something about it because they're killing off their people. They're killing off their market, like Patty mentioned. So that's where I fall on it.
I have a question that I'd like anybody to chime in on, but to what extent do you think that the drug merchants control our own government? How much are they involved in campaign contributions? How much are they involved by really owning the congressmen and senators?
That would be really hard. I can't imagine that.
You've got to imagine it. It's more evident every day.
The Sinaloa cartel puts it on the form that we made a $100,000 donation to a congressman. I don't want to get into the rabbit hole of the conspiracy and that kind of stuff. I just don't feel comfortable trying to peg some sort of congressman. Now, if you want to talk about pharmaceutical companies, that's one thing.
Yeah,
that's one thing. But I really hesitate to say, oh, we've got congressmen that are on the take by these cartels. I don't know if that's kind of a stretch. I just don't want to go there.
Well, how do you know if we don't go there? You see, we don't have anybody who's going there. We don't have the ones in power. We don't have anybody.
I don't know. I just
hey, look at it this way. Let's try a different product. Suppose automobiles were now unregulated in terms of safety, and we see a rise in cars going bad and people killed on the highway. What would we do?
Well, make more laws.
We would put some agency, something to work that had the power to get to the dealers, the distributors, and straighten it out.
We have a DEA. We have a drug enforcement agency. We have an NSA that collects more information on all of us here than you can possibly imagine.
What are they doing with it?
Oh, they're doing things with it. Trust me, they're doing things with it.
I don't think they are.
I really, I don't know if we want to show our hand to the drug cartels as to how they're using it. But if we find that the drug cartels are using banks to park cash, confiscate the money, take the money from them. Let's work on the demand issue. Let's get these people off of it. Let's reinforce our laws.
Find out who the people are who run cartels and arrest or shoot them.
we know them, but they're embedded in countries that we really don't want to invade. I guess going
But
back
we
to Ron's
know
point.
their systems and our borders and those countries. That's where it happens. Let's stop it.
I don't know what system we would have other than what you see in the movies of some DEA person having a Reaper drone, send a missile into some mansion. I don't think that really happens. Maybe it does, but I don't think we're in the business of invading countries that are sovereign. Maybe there is some sort of, I wouldn't want to discount that kind of stuff, but I just don't know if it plays out like it does in the movies all the time. I'm a little skeptical about that.
Well, I'm not
Patty,
talking
you look
about movies. I'm talking about putting somebody, an agency, in charge, responsible, that has the resources to shut down a cartel when they know where and who it is and how it exists.
The issue, I get it, but it's like dealing with an octopus. There's a lot of tentacles. It reaches here and there and all that kind of stuff. Okay, let's give the DEA a checkbook to go after these guys. I'm all for that. We have it. We have the Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA. They're up and running. They've got plenty of tools. Let's just take the hobbles off of them.
But Bryan, apparently they're not very effective because the drug use continues to rise. People continue to die.
But see, that's the issue with just going at it from one possible way. You have to look at this holistically. You have to do something about the demand. You have to do something about the supply. You have to have an enforcement agency that has the ability to enforce the laws. When somebody, Patty, pointed out that a lot of this fentanyl comes in through our borders. When you have a border patrol that's basically a sieve, and hundreds of thousands of people are coming over, I can't imagine that some of those aren't cartel mules that are carrying hundreds of thousands of dollars of fentanyl. Well,
I want to thank you all for your contributions on this topic. I think we could probably go on for a long time, but unfortunately, our time is up.
Good seeing you.
Good seeing you too.
Stay safe, everybody.
Bye-bye.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.